All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Today we're going to talk really quickly about trip planning, but supercharging. Obviously, Tesla has built-in software to help you navigate your destination to get you from point A to point B, factoring in charging times at superchargers, which is great. So it'll get you from supercharger to supercharger, no problem. And then what happens is when you get to your destination, it'll give you an estimated state of charge for when you're going to get to your destination. So this is all great because back in the day, which is effectively 4 or 5 years ago, they didn't have this. It wasn't as robust. Obviously, the supercharger network wasn't as big as it is now. But also, there was no real mechanism for planning in full in terms of how much state of charge you're going to have. This is something that's relatively new. And so if you were trying to make a long distance trip, you can map out where the superchargers were, but then you have to use something like EV Trip Planner, which was actually awesome. So shout out to those guys who put that together to be able to calculate the distance you were going, the stops you'd need to make based on your vehicle, and how much range you would have. So they basically made a sort of homegrown version of the algorithm that Tesla is using to calculate state of charge, distance, speed of driving, things of that nature. Okay, so now Tesla has this in the car and it's great, but there's only one little catch, and this is may catch people off guard if they're first time users of the system. They just got their car, they're trying to plan a trip. And that is, there's superchargers all over the place. If I press this button here, you'll see that superchargers are abundant. There's a lot of them here. There's destination chargers as well, superchargers all over the place. Again, destination chargers as well. So one of the problems with this planning is that it does take into consideration the state of charge, as I mentioned. However, it doesn't take into consideration local charging. And this is one of the catches that you have to really realize and pay attention to, especially if it's your first time planning a trip. And that is, if your trip is planned from a supercharger to a destination, and as we see here, my destination is way down here and there are no superchargers. There's a couple of destination chargers, but you may have to be patrons of this establishment in order to be able to get that one. You may need to be a patron of this establishment in order to have access to this one. And so the idea behind this is that if you're just supercharging, you're trying to get to your destination, you want to take into consideration local driving as well as local charging. So really, there is no local charging here from my perspective, right? And maybe depending on where you're going, if you're going into the mountains, or you're going somewhere remote, there may not be local charging. And therefore, you're going to have to charge extra here in order to make sure you have enough room to drive around and enough room to get back. So one of the things that Tesla put in here is they did put a estimator to tell you what the round trip is going to be. They'll tell you what the round trip is going to be from your your destination to your target location, which is great. So really, the only calculation that you actually have to do is understanding that, hey, if I get here, I'm going to have 17%, right? But how much is it going to take for me to get from here to there? And effectively, how long is it going to take, or how much energy is it going to take for me to get back to this supercharging destination? Okay, so this is really where the only calculation sort of planning has to take place in terms of the trip planner and charging. Again, ideally, if you could charge at your destination, that's great. You bring your charge cord, you charge overnight. If it's a slow charge, or if you find a destination charger, you can charge there. But if that's not the case, which is typical of most places that you might go, especially if it's a hotel or someplace that doesn't have outside outlets, you definitely want to take into consideration how much local driving you're going to do and how much energy it's going to take to get back to your supercharger so you can charge and get on your way. Okay? And so make sure you take that into consideration, because a trip planner will plan to get you here with at least 5 to 10% state of charge. However, that might not be enough to get back for sure, and it's definitely not going to be enough to drive around and do whatever you need to do. So keep that in mind as you're driving, just as a pro tip, to make sure that you never run out of power, run out of charge, or don't have a place to charge. Okay? And now I see I have 20% here now, which I know it takes 20% to get here. So if you look at my current state of charge, it's about 40%, okay? And right here, I'll have 20% when I get to my destination. So roughly about 20%, give or take a couple of percentage points, depending on how fast I'm driving, depending on other factors as well. So again, 20% to the destination, 40% on the state of charge. And so now we're in a situation where it's going to take 20%. So wherever I get back to, I have to have 20% in reserve to be able to make it back to this supercharger. Okay, so I want to make sure I have at least 40% when I get to my destination so that I can make it back to this supercharging. So take that into consideration when you're driving. Share this information. And again, subscribe, like, and share if you like the videos, and leave some comments and thoughts about how you plan trips, and if you have any other questions about trip planning if you're about to get a Tesla. Talk to you soon.